everyone, this is Dr. Nisha Nujumudeen. The concept of discussion for the day is three concepts. One is green GDP. Next is GPI, which is an alternative for GDP. And the third one is per capita income. So now all those who have missed out the concept 1 to 6, what you do is you can check out the playlist of this particular series of videos so that you can brush up those concepts. Now, to begin with, what is green GDP in simple terms? We all know what is GDP. It is the total or the final output that is produced within the domestic territory of a country for a period of 1 year. Now, in this factor called GDP, when we include certain other elements like environmental factors, then that is called as green GDP in simple terms. Green GDP is nothing but taking environmental cost or damage into consideration. Today, development is not just development, rather it is sustainable development, using resources for the present or current generation with the aim of preserving certain resources for the future generation as a whole. So now, for a sustainability or sustainable or long-term development, we have to protect what? Our environment. What are we seeing these days? Too much of pollution, loss of biodiversity, resource depletions, deforestation, etc. So the activities done by human beings, which is hampering the environment, in a way is also hampering the existence of whom? The survival of human beings. Having said that, it is said that when you calculate GDP, if you try to include the cost of environmental damage or degradation, then you get a different figure altogether. That is called as green GDP in simple terms. Now, why do we use green GDP? To understand what is the sustainability level of our economy. That is how much of impact has been caused because of environmental damages. But now, practically if you see, green GDP is not that popular or it is not that used by many countries because of the lack of availability of proper statistical data and due to certain other fluctuations as well. So now, though green GDP is a concept which is welcoming, or let's say which is including the environmental factors, and we'll be able to understand what is the real development, because today sustainable development means what? Not only economic and social indicators, it also takes into consideration environmental factors as a whole. See, if there is too much of pollution in the environment, can you go out? No, it will cause a lot of trouble for your health. Recently, we saw in the news 2 days back that Delhi, the city of Delhi, is facing the issues of air quality crisis. The air quality index has exceeded 450, right? People are breathing poison there. That is a statement given. So now this will cause serious health issues, right? Similarly, so many other environmental damages like resource depletion, loss of biodiversity, deforestation, all these hamper what? The environment. So now when these factors are taken into consideration while calculating GDP, you will be able to understand the real GDP. That is what the green GDP concept tells. But again, no countries prefer calculating green GDP. For example, if you see, GDP is of a country is $100 million. Okay. Now, if I'm including this green GDP, matlab, if I'm including the environmental damage caused to that particular country due to various reasons like pollution, deforestation, etc., it comes to $20 million. Now, when I include this $20 million into the 100 million traditional GDP, automatically the value of my GDP comes down. And for every country, the environmental laws, rules, regulations differ as well. So that is one reason why green GDP is not taken into consideration for measuring the growth or progress between countries. Though it is a good term also, a good concept also, we do not incorporate it. And thus, this green GDP is nothing but GDP minus cost of environmental degradation. How much of harmful impact has caused because of this so-called issues of environment and how it is impacting the growth and development. That is called as green GDP in simple term. If you see in our country India, as per 2019 data, some research was done, and in that particular research, it was estimated that India's green GDP has increased, or it was between rupees 165 to rupees 167 trillion. Whereas, when this was the case, it showed a 10% reduction, or let's say it led to a 10% lowering from the conventional or the traditional GDP. The traditional, or let's say the conventional GDP, was around 185 trillion. But now, when you included the cost of environmental degradation or damage into the traditional or the conventional GDP, the value came down. And that shows that a country needs to do a lot more with regard to what? The environmental parameters. So that is the reason we don't actually take what? Green GDP. Having said that, the next topic of discussion is GPI, that is Genuine Progress Indicator. So have you any time thought about, okay, is there an alternative to GDP? Now, to all those who have thought, why can't GDP have an alternative? If that is the case, the indicator called as Genuine Progress Indicator is a measure or a metric that is introduced as an alternative to GDP. We have something called as Human Development Index. It is exclusively what? A social indicator. It does not take into consideration environmental or let's say economic factors, only social factors like education, health, etc. Having said that, Genuine Progress Indicator, it is a metric or a measure that was developed as an alternative to the concept called as Gross Domestic Product. Here, we will measure the growth of a country by taking into consideration three factors: economic indicators, social indicators, plus environmental factors. The environmental factors will also be incorporated. So all the three will come at a stretch under Genuine Progress Indicator. It sounds good, right? Why can't we think of replacing GDP with Genuine Progress Indicator or GPI? But again, due to the availability of data of, let's say, environmental factors or even other social indicators, many countries, though they wanted to implement Genuine Progress Indicator also, it was not that officially accepted. So even today, to measure the growth or the progress between nations, we use the indicator called as GDP. Now, the next one is per capita income. So per capita income, in simple terms, we say national income divided by population. It is also one of the most important indicator to understand what is the quality of life of people or what is the real living standard of the population. In simple terms, per capita income can be defined as the average income of a people, the average income earned by the people of a country. When you calculate the income per head or per person of a country divided by the total population. In simple terms, per capita income is equal to national income of a country divided by its total population. That will give you PCI or per capita income. This per capita will enable you to understand what is the income or what is the PPP, which means purchasing power parity or capacity of the individuals of an economy. That is, how much capacity they have to purchase a commodity or a service. It is high or low. Higher the income, higher the purchasing power parity or capacity. So now having said that, this per capita income, if it is high, means people in a country have more purchasing capacity, which means their purchasing power parity is high, which automatically leads to higher GDP and vice versa. But this per capita income has a limitation. It only measures what is the average income earned per person in a country with regard to the total population. It do not take into consideration the income disparities of a country. You are just worried or bothered about what is the income of an individual, each individual. High or low doesn't matter. So that is why the per capita income of a country, India, is also higher. But if you see the disparity, you can see in India, rich people are becoming more and more rich. Poor is becoming more and more poor. As per one of the recent data, I can tell you that only 1% of the top or rich population has access to 40.1% of wealth. And again, to put it across like this, only 10% of India's population has access, or let's say only 10% of India's population is using majority of resources, like 80% of the world's resources, whereas remaining 90% of population has access to only 10% of the resources, which shows the greater disparity or the divide between rich and poor, which is income inequality, right? That is not taken into consideration during the calculation of what? Per capita income. So in simple terms, per capita income is what is the average income earned by every individual of a country, and we measure it by dividing it with the total population. I hope it is crystal clear for you. So now I'll come up with more topics like this in the next video. Make sure that you subscribe the channel so that you get notification for this regular series of videos. Thank you and Jai Hind.